we're right on the cusp of passing the most important investments in our families. So you'll have cheaper childcare, so you'll be able to afford prescription drugs like insulin, so that you can keep an elder parent at home longer and more affordably. Those are real things that people get. But we got to achieve these results. We got to stick together to do that. I'm proud of the president and I'm proud of my party for getting it done. And we're going to go tell people about it.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Capehart podcast on Washington Post Live. I am Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. So history has shown that the party that wins the White House usually goes on to lose seats in Congress in the midterm elections 2 years later. Only one election in recent memory defied that. The midterm elections of 2002, when Republicans not only retained control of the House, they gained seats. As chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the job of my guest today is to make history repeat itself 20 years later. He is Congressman Patrick Maloney from the great state of New York. Welcome to Capehart.
Welcome to you. This is exciting to see you in this new format, and congratulations on all your success. I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you, Congressman. So let's handle the history question first. Senator Lindsey Graham says the 2022 elections are going to be, quote, a wipeout for Democrats. How are you going to defy history in next year's midterms in the House?
Right. Well, we're going to make history by making history by passing the most sweeping changes that help Americans that have been done in decades, and we're getting it done right now. First, save the American economy. Millions of small businesses are going today because of the rescue plan. Our schools, our local communities, followed up with huge investments in roads and bridges and clean drinking water, airports and broadband systems. That's the infrastructure bill. And finally, the most important investments in our families in decades. We're talking about cheaper child care for folks, a child tax cut for working and middle class families so they can raise their kids with a little more security. Talking about cheaper health insurance, talking about being able to stay home longer as an aging American and not lose your dignity, all at lower cost. And the most important work to save the climate at the same time, while creating jobs with tens of thousands of new electric charging stations at good union labor, with electrifying the federal fleet, and all the other things that we're doing right now that are going to make a big difference in people's lives. So what we're doing is hard, Jonathan. We're going to fix these tough problems. We're going to go out and tell people we did it, and that's how we're going to win.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk more about the issues later, although you laid them all out in answer to the first question. But what do you see as the political impact of redistricting in 2022? When I had the election forecaster Rachel Bidikofer on my MSNBC show beforehand, I asked her, hey, could you come on and show me the 10 House races that you're looking at that'll show you whether control will move to the Republicans? And she said to me, I can't do it because, with redistricting, Democrats are going to lose 10 seats before a vote has even been cast. And this was months ago, mind you. This was about 6-7 months ago. But the point of the question is, redistricting is also going to play a major role in whether you are going to be able to succeed in helping Democrats hold on to the House, isn't it?
Yeah, put it on the list, Jonathan. Look, those predictions are overly pessimistic. I know, look, we're Democrats and we specialize in this sort of sky is falling stuff. But let me break it down for you. About half the states in the country have now completed their redistricting process. We're doing better than most people thought. And the fact is this is a house-to-house fight. The Republicans are holding better turf than we are. We know that. But we are in this game. And when we are all said and done, we're going to have a map we can win on. And I'm telling you, this election is going to be about bigger things than that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So after Glenn Youngkin's victory in the Virginia governor's race, the NRCC expanded its target list of Democratic House seats from 57 to 70. Why shouldn't Republicans feel bullish about the midterms?
Look, every time Kevin McCarthy, is doing stuff like that, when they're measuring the drapes, when they're counting the victory before anybody's cast a vote, I feel a little better. That is classic tortoise in the hare thinking, where they think they're so far ahead, they're just going to go to sleep under a tree and take a nap, and we're just going to keep chugging by them. And the way we're going to do that is by getting big things done, by telling people what we did, by running good campaigns and good candidates, by being smart about how our candidates conduct that. And I just tell you, when I look around and I look at the things we're getting done, and the likelihood that next year we're going to be in such a better place in terms of our economy, in terms of the supply chain, inflation, in terms of the pandemic, and we are going to be the ones who have put those solutions in place with the Republicans fighting us every step of the way. We're going to have something to say, and that is going to be a comeback narrative that you're all going to be talking about come Labor Day.
All right, one more question on this, the nitty gritty here. How much should Democrats invoke the name of Donald Trump in their races next year?
I think this is my favorite, dumbest thing that you guys in the media focus on. I think it is such a false choice, if I can say. Look, we're not running this race on Donald Trump. I have had my lifetime fill of Donald Trump. I hope you all have. The fact is that we are going to run this race on a record of results, on delivering better jobs, better health care, better, stronger families, and we're doing it. But we are going to draw a contrast, and this is where Trump comes in. We're going to draw a contrast with a team that has no ideas for America, that has a ploy to empower themselves, that seeks to exploit the frustrations of so many people to try to build off that anger of political power. That's what they're doing with this nonsense and QAnon and these conspiracy theories. That's what they're doing, trying to whip up people about things that aren't in your kid's backpack, or making parents more frustrated after the 2 toughest years they've ever had sending their kids to school. We know what they're doing. But the fact is that it's that toxic ugliness that came with Donald Trump that is an important contrast between us and our opponents. So it's not the main argument. It's part of a 1-2 punch, but you lead with a record of results, and then you say who the other guys are.
All right. The Wall Street Journal released a survey this month that shows voters very pessimistic about the economy, particularly regarding inflation. What's the message to anxious voters on this? And will inflation recede enough by next November to improve voters' confidence in the economy?
A rough stretch, and people are struggling. And that's why we are working so hard to give you better infrastructure, better roads, better bridges, better ports, more supply-side investments so the supply chain issues are never going to bother us again. I think if you look at the progress we've made on that, by the way, there's reason to believe that's getting better fast. On inflation, we've seen energy prices come down dramatically recently since the president released the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We think that's a good sign, and will really make an impact at the pump for folks, and will also affect the price of groceries and food. The economy is growing so far this year at nearly 8%. It's, I believe, since the 1940s we've experienced that level of economic growth, and the employment numbers are also super strong. But people haven't felt it yet, and the pandemic is still a real weight around people's necks. So we know it's rough out there, but what we're doing is we have a plan to make these problems better, to fix these problems that are frustrating folks, while the other side seeks to exploit them for political gain. And it's going to take a while for people to feel all the effects, you bet. But we also have to tell them, and that's why we're out there doing 1,000 events talking about infrastructure. The president's up to, I think, event 6 or 7 talking about the infrastructure bill in districts where it really matters. I think we're moving in the right direction, but we got to keep going.
Well, let's talk about President Biden, because I'm wondering, in listening to you, will it be enough for Democrats to campaign on the messaging that you have been giving us throughout this interview? You know, the president's poll numbers are in the low 40s, and Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin of Illinois has called those numbers, quote, scary. So will it be enough for Democrats to, especially in those districts where the president is unpopular, to get Build Back Better passed, to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, to talk about the American Rescue Plan, to talk about the things that you're doing to get things done?
I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Free Joe Biden. Get him out there. Every time he's hanging out with guys in hard hats or on a factory floor, driving some pickup truck off an assembly line, that's a good day for him, for us. And it's because it's where his heart is and where the focus is of our agenda, which is helping working and middle-class families like the one I grew up in make ends meet, have a better job, be able to pay the bills, put the kids in a safe, good school, not worry about health insurance if somebody gets sick, look forward to retirement. Those are the American dream fundamentals that Joe Biden speaks about because he's experienced it as well as anybody. And I just think that the best message, Jonathan, is impact. The best message is when we have done things that change people's lives and they know we did it. And if you look at the miracle, the child tax cut is working in millions of American families right now, helping them pay the bills, helping them fix the car when it breaks so they can still go to work. That's the kind of impact we're having. And look, we're getting our legs under us in terms of that message. It could have been better, you bet. But looking forward, we got a lot to work with. The president's in the game. The members of the Democratic caucus are in the game. We just have to keep going.
But here's the enduring frustration. All of the things that you're talking about in terms of energy prices coming down, the economy doing better. I think you mentioned that economic growth is what, 8% annualized. I saw a headline in the paper today. Wages are expected to go up next year. Unemployment is the lowest it's been in a long time. Job creation is on the rise with revisions of previous job creation numbers upward. But why isn't all of that success inuring to the president's benefit in terms of poll numbers? Sorry, Congressman, we have lost your audio. I think.
Can you hear me?
Say something? Yes, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry. Look, obviously we've got work to do, but let me tell you what. I won a district 5 times that voted for Donald Trump. I'm a gay guy with an interracial family in a Trump district, so I've not won it 5 times by hoping for the best. But I also never led in a single poll until I beat my Republican opponent, and I've beat 4 since that. So you want to peak at the right time. The point is not that we need to move at the speed of cable news or to win every news cycle along the way. The point is to show some leadership, tackle these big problems that are bedeviling our country, fix them, and then when they're working and we've told people and they're feeling it, get the political benefit at the right time. And right now, you want me to sell the drive, I want to sell the touchdown. We have done 2 of the 3 big things we need to do this year. We are about to punch the 3rd one into the end zone. And I'm just telling you, if you give me that to talk about for a whole year, and you let this economy really start moving, and this pandemic get in the rearview mirror, things are going to look very different by early fall next year.
Well, let's talk more about the pandemic, because the global pandemic did serious political damage to Donald Trump. And part of that is because he tried to ignore it and tried to downplay it. But is it doing political damage to President Biden, despite the great successes we've had as far as vaccinations are concerned? Once again, Congressman, your audio is out. Can we get the Congressman's audio back in? Not yet.
Try now.
All right.
Bear with me, Jonathan.
We're gonna take a little break. We're gonna try to reconnect with the Congressman. We'll be just a minute or so. Stay with us.
Sorry, Jonathan. Can you hear me? Going to kill it in the next election. They're coming back live. Yeah.
All right, Congressman Patrick Maloney, you are back. Before we had the technical difficulty, I was asking you about the global pandemic and how it did do political damage to Donald Trump because, well, he tried to ignore it and it exploded. But I'm wondering, is it doing political damage to President Biden, even though we've had success in vaccinations around the country?
Right. Well, 200 million Americans have had a shot. We have made huge progress on the pandemic. But look, there are 700,000 people families out there who've lost a loved one. This has been terrible. And even if you've been lucky enough not to lose someone you love, I mean, my goodness, small businesses have been struggling. So many people's life dreams have been on the line. I mean, think about what parents and teachers and healthcare workers are going through. So there's been so much pain. Of course, the president is hurt by. In less than a year, 200 million Americans have received a shot. We have made huge progress towards vaccinating the world as well. And the American people should know we're leading the effort in that. And so I just have to say, you know, we are the ones who have been saying consistently, we want to get your small businesses back open. That's why, you know, mask wearing was important. We're trying to get your schools back to normal. That's why everybody needs to get vaccinated. And we have been facing the kind of extreme conspiracy theories and nonsense from the other side that has hampered our efforts at every turn. The baseless attacks on Anthony Fauci, the nonsense about vaccine, efficacy, and now fighting vaccine requirements where they make sense for healthcare workers and for people in the military and first responders, so that everybody involved is safe. So we're the team that is fixing this problem. No, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And I understand why it's been frustrating.
Well, let's talk about an issue that's been a bit of a problem, not a bit, a problem for Democrats. Your Republican counterpart, Congressman Tom Emmer, Republican of Indiana, said, quote, "Democrats are now the party of defund the police." Not true, but the perception for a lot of voters is that it is true. Meanwhile, ABC News reports that at least 12 major American cities have hit homicide records in this year, with most of them having Democratic mayors, those cities. The issue of crime is going to hurt Democrats, isn't it? And how do you counter that?
Well, we are going to address that with real solutions. The fact is that no one, not me, not anyone, is saying that we need to take one step back from public safety. We need to have safe streets. We need to have safe cities. That is absolutely essential. But we reject the false choice, and worse, the cynicism and, yes, racism involved in trying to set up a choice between public safety and racial justice, between public safety and having everybody treated equal under the law. So there are good common sense reforms. We think that police ought to have more training. That's more funding, by the way. We think police ought to have body cameras on cars and on officers. We think that there ought to be, statistics on which police departments are doing well and doing badly. We think that there are common sense reforms working with good police that will improve policing and public safety and racial justice. And the other side is engaged in a game, you know this, Jonathan, where they seek to exploit this issue for political gain, and they're willing to use racism to do it. But let's remember, when it came down to it, in the rescue plan, the most important funding for first responders and police that has been passed since I've been in Congress, 100% of the Republicans voted against that funding for state and local governments that is funding the police. They literally voted to defund the police.
Right. This morning on our favorite show, Morning Joe, where you are a frequent guest, they played a clip of the Philadelphia district attorney, and I'm paraphrasing here, where he was saying, when asked about the spike in crime, violent crime in Philadelphia, he said flat out, there is no spike in crime. There is no spike in violent crime. And a big discussion ensued around the table about this, quote unquote, the wokeness of white liberals downplaying what is happening in these cities at the detriment of people of color. I would love to get your view on this, of sort of denying what statistics are saying that's happening around the country.
No, denial equals disaster. You've got to look these things square in the face, and you've got to see the truth. Crime is something we must talk about and we must address. But we're the guys with solutions, and we're the guys who reject the false choice between going back or using mass incarceration or some sort of other tools that will not fix the problem, and create the kind of society we all want to live in. There are good common sense solutions to public safety that we can engage in. And we need to resource it first and foremost with good policing and good police reform that will actually increase public safety and the relationship between communities and law enforcement. We can do both.
Why don't you think, speaking of police reform, why don't you think the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which passed the House easily and early, but then went over to the Senate where it's gone nowhere? In fact, negotiations went on for months and months, and then they were just broken off. Why can't the Senate and therefore the Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act so President Biden can sign it?
Well, I'll be very honest with you. I think I watched my colleague Karen Bass work for months in good faith to try to move that legislation, working with Tim Scott, Senator Tim Scott, and others. And a lot of us, had every confidence that she was doing everything that could be done, and I think she did. So my conclusion is that Mitch McConnell and the guys in the Senate don't care, and they don't want to do anything, and they wanted to rope-a-dope us until the heat went out of it, and they could move on without paying a political price. And sadly, I think that's their approach to a lot of issues. Because when you think about it, they don't want to give up this caricature, this lie about defund the police by letting us actually engage in bipartisan reform that would help. So their political objective is at odds with what's good for the country and the reforms we needed. So as we sit here, months and months after George Floyd was murdered, nothing has changed. And that is unacceptable. And we're the guys who say, look, we're not gonna accept the false choice between focusing on public safety and fighting crime and also engaging in common sense reform so we can have more racial justice and more equity in the way it's done. We can do both. But I'm sorry, you're dealing with people who don't share our values and who are engaged in a bunch of games to win political power. And sadly, that's what happened to the Justice and Policing Act.
And so I was about to say, and that last assessment that you made of the Republican Party in the Senate, that also applies to voting rights, no? Their inaction on voting rights.
100%. I believe that's exactly the same calculation, and it's sad, but it's also infuriating. What they've decided is that they can't win by letting everybody vote. Let's remember, we beat them by 7 million votes in the presidential election, beat them by 4.7 million votes in the House races. They're losing the popular vote every cycle. And they are engaged in gerrymandering and trying to stack the deck and passing Jim Crow-style voting laws and in stopping the kinds of voter protections we ought to have because they see a political benefit in it. And unfortunately, the Republican Party is no longer in a competition of ideas with us. They're in a game to win power, and they're doing that with a couple of tools. One is to look for sources of hatred and frustration and make them worse as a way to say things are bad. And the other is to rig this process through voting laws and gerrymandering so that a majority of the voters don't get their will and these guys can continue to rule. And that's what we're up against.
What does it mean? You mentioned the fact that President Biden got 7 million more votes than Donald Trump, if I heard you right. But the thing that the number that jumped out at me is the fact that Donald Trump got 12 million more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016. What does that say to you about who we are and where we're going as a nation?
Well, remember, I represent a district that voted for Donald Trump in 2016. So you're talking about a lot of people who also voted for me. By definition, I don't win my seat in Congress without people who voted for Donald Trump voting for me. So I take that very seriously. I think, look, most of those folks are good, decent people who are frustrated about what they see out there. Remember, there's a whole narrative out there that's feeding them information that is trying to stir them up, trying to make them angry. That's Fox News and the rest. They're good at what they do, and they've got them all worked up. But the fact is that we don't count how many more votes the loser got. We care about who won. And Joe Biden won walking away on that popular vote, and we won walking away on the House popular vote. So the fact is that we've got a system, because of the way districts are drawn and the way the Senate works, that allows the minority in this country to have more power than it would in other systems. That's what we're up against in the Senate. But let me just say one more thing. For all the Democrats out there who think everybody agrees with us, they don't. There is another narrative, and they don't think we have all the answers, and they've heard our arguments, and they prefer the other sides. And so the fact is that we're going to have to engage, like I have to in my district, in a competition for the support of people who don't already agree with us. And it's hard to do that when you don't listen as much as you talk. So we have to be in relationship with those voters, and that's what we're doing this cycle. We're not giving up on rural areas. We're not giving up on folks who voted for Trump. We're going to go out and we're going to talk to them.
All right, in the little time that we have left, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round. One, do you think Donald Trump is going to run for president in 2024? I mean, the guy's got an 86% approval rating among Republicans in the latest Q poll.
Well, I don't know, but every time I take a question about Donald Trump, it seems to be followed by a question about why we only spend time talking about Donald Trump. But I will tell you, I don't care, Jonathan. I mean, you don't know, don't care. Yeah, sure. I mean, birds got to fly, fish got to swim. I think Trump is going to want to stay in that limelight. I do think there's a lot of chickens coming home to roost for him, and it may be harder than he thinks. But what I know we're going to do is get things done and focus on fixing problems.
Will President Biden be the top of the ticket in 2024?
100%. That would be my assumption, and I'd be excited about it.
If President Biden decides not to run for re-election, would it be a mistake for Democrats to not rally around Vice President Harris to ensure that she is the unchallenged nominee?
Well, I admire the double hypothetical in your question, but listen, I'm a big fan of the vice president, and I can't imagine a world where we all wouldn't be excited about her being our standard bearer. But I expect Joe Biden to remain at the top of the ticket. I'm sure she does as well.
All right, here's an opportunity for you to just open up the flamethrower on the press if you want to. What do you make of the relentlessly negative coverage of Vice President Harris?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think she is getting a different standard of coverage. I think they're covering her like a president, and I don't think that implicit bias in a way around some of the coverage I see of her is even, I don't think people are aware that they're doing it. I think that's the nature of implicit bias. I think she's being held to a tough standard. I actually think she's a smart, capable person doing a good job, and she's gotten a kind of a rough shake out there. But look, she's a professional. She's tough. She knows this is the deep end of the pool, and she's going to be just fine.
And last question, what do you think of the overwhelmingly positive coverage, almost universally positive coverage that Secretary Pete Buttigieg is getting?
Well, look, Secretary Pete ran an inspiring campaign for those of us in the LGBT community. I understand why people are excited about Secretary Pete, Mayor Pete. I think he's a huge talent. But I wouldn't read too much into that. I think this is the kind of thing you guys love to do, inside the Beltway. It doesn't mean much anywhere else.
Okay, I asked you to open up the flamethrower, and you did. Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney from the great state of New York, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and more importantly, husband to Randy and father to Essie, Daly, and Jesus. Thank you very, very much for coming to Capehart.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan.
And as always, thank you for joining us. To check out what interviews we have coming up, head to WashingtonPostLive.com. Once again, I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Thanks for watching Capehart on Washington Post Live.